Hello, hello. How is everyone doing tonight? We wanted to come on. It's been a little while since we've done a video about kids and helping kids with conflicts, and I've had several questions lately from a bunch of different people. Really, I don't know, I'd say more than about 50% of the questions I get are about like people's kids having health issues and, understanding the conflicts, and then, how do you help a kid that's had some type of conflict or an ongoing conflict that's affected their self-image, and you can tell that it's like they are having conflicts over and over again based off of one core thing that happened. Maybe it was a trauma. Maybe they've got a self-devaluation conflict due to something that happened to them early in life, fear fright conflicts, death fright conflicts, separation conflicts. I mean, you name it. Kids are very sensitive and they experience all sorts of things in early life. And so a lot of times the parents, the first time they find out about it is when the child has a symptom. And it's actually a really wonderful thing that you now have this layer, this new way to communicate and understand your child and how they're experiencing their world, because their body is telling you, it's revealing to you what is going on mentally and emotionally with that child. And so you can kind of learn things from that. And then we want to talk about communicating that, so helping the kids to understand the connection between their emotional experience and their physical symptoms. And then it's like, oh gosh, what do we do about the actual conflict itself? Is there a way to help them process that so that it doesn't have to be an ongoing issue? It doesn't have to continue to affect their self-image and how they feel about themselves. So lots of little details to get into tonight. One particular question that we had was having to do with like chest and cough, cold recurrent issues going on with the chest and lungs. And so that could be like a single conflict of a fear fright, a scare fright where you were like speechless, a death fright conflict, or it could be a combination of conflicts leading to something like asthma where it's been layered. A conflict constellation, for those of you who may not know, Dr. Hammer found that when there are certain patterns of symptoms, so asthma is one of them, a lot of the mental illness type symptoms like schizophrenia, depression, OCD has to do with a conflict constellation. And that happens when there are two conflicts that have happened without resolution that are affecting opposite sides of the brain, most likely in the cerebral cortex, but it can happen in other areas of the brain too. And the child gets locked into a conflict constellation. And many times they'll even freeze their maturation and development mentally because the body is just kind of in lockdown mode because of the fact they've had so many conflicts. And so it can be somewhat complicated to unravel some of these conflict constellations and conflicts in kids, but it just takes experimentation, curiosity, just a willingness to try things in like a lighthearted way, especially with children, because they can tell if you're really scared or if you're really intense about something, it can kind of make the process of them releasing the conflict more difficult. And so how you feel about it really does matter.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, kids in general are more intelligent than adults, I think, because they haven't had their sensitivities kind of tamped down or interfered with. They haven't learned how to be stupid. You know what I mean? Which is something I think that a lot of us do. I mean, I know I learned how to not notice certain things in my household so that I didn't roll my eyes about them, so that I didn't get in trouble. And with children, there's an immense sensitivity there. One thing I have noticed with parents and how they tend to interact with their kids is that you care so much about your kids. You're so concerned about them, you want things to turn out a certain way, it can kind of cause you to put blinders on in terms of, be very mindful of the fact that you are your child's parent when interacting with them, and be very mindful of the fact that they are mindful of the fact that you are their parent, because you just experience yourself as just, it's my job to solve this little human being's problem. They're suffering, I feel so terrible, and it's particularly if it comes to something like a self-devaluation. Very often, like I remember when I was a child and I had certain self-confidence issues or whatever, and my mom would almost like try to smother them out of existence. And I remember being just utterly repelled by it. And I remember the way she was, oh, Steve, there's nothing wrong with you. You've that fed into the overall experience I was having. You know what I'm saying? Of being a little weirdo, or being somebody who was, whose mom is like super into him. You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean? Like that was like very protective and like a mama's boy or whatever. And so I think that one of the best things as a parent and helping a child, I think that you can do, certainly if you have sort of a strange child like me, because I was a kind of weird kid. I think all kids are wonderfully weird in this way, and they're very perceptive to this stuff, and they may not complain about it, but I feel like they're so sensitive to, they're constantly saying, what does this mean? What does this mean about me? What does it mean about me? My parent is treating me this way. What does it mean about me what does it mean about me that they're making such a big show that everything's okay? I remember just constantly processing that stuff. It's preserving for yourself the ability to interact with your child as an individual. Because there's a lot of times when you can be their mom or their dad, and that's like the most helpful, wonderful thing you can do. But there's also times when you can just kind of be straight up with them, and just engage with them at kind of an adult part of your personality to adult part of their personality level, and help them deal with the reality of whatever's going on for them. I can imagine, I don't have kids, but I can imagine as a parent, it's probably crushing to think that your child is devaluing themselves in some way, and you just want to just like slather them in love or something like that. But sometimes that sometimes maybe it is a thing to do, but sometimes maybe you need to help them as an individual deal with the fact that they are devaluing themselves, rather than, oh, don't do that, that's unthinkable, it's so bad because you're so wonderful. Say, all right, listen, it sounds like what's going on is this, or you're feeling bad about this, or embarrassed about this, or whatever. Let's see what we can do about the fact that you feel that way. That's an immensely powerful thing. In therapy, successful therapists in general are people who, they meet people in their model of reality. And what that means is that rather than, like, if you're telling me that you feel not okay, and I sort of say to you, what are you talking about? You're fine. You're good looking. You're successful. People like you. You're popular. You've got no reason to think you're not okay. That's not meeting you in your model of reality, right? I'm looking at how I see you, and I say, because you have all these things going for you, I don't understand why you would be devaluing yourself, and therefore you should just stop it. That doesn't work too well. But if you see your child, and I think every parent sees their child as perfect, or I think that's a nice thing if you do, you see the child and you cannot imagine why they would not be, confident and happy about who they are and everything. And yet the fact is they're not, if they're devaluing themselves. The fact is that they're sitting there, and their experience of themselves, their model of reality, their understanding of themselves or their relationship to the world and other people is that in some way they're not okay, or that something's not right. And as sort of weird as this can feel, if instead of trying to convince them not to feel that way, you acknowledge that they're feeling that way. You say, it's not a big deal. It's okay that you're feeling that way. Maybe you don't say it explicitly, but you communicate that. And you say, let's go to work on the fact that you feel that way. Let's deal with the task at hand. Let's not, very often people, whether they're therapists or coaches or friends or parents, people interact with each other in largely the same ways. And one of the ways in which, like, sort of well-intended people who really want to help someone else, one of the ways they kind of get in their own way is that they refuse to deal with the reality of who they're dealing with and what they're experiencing. And they want to deal with how they think they should be feeling. My child is perfect. They should be feeling good. So I'm going to interact with my child as if they're feeling good, even if they're not. Or I'm going to tell them that they shouldn't be feeling insecure or unpopular or unattractive or whatever, because I don't think they should be. It feels, what I'm talking about? It feels like a sort of loving thing to do, but really you can be so much more helpful if you will meet them as an individual in that moment in time. You say, I think really successful, really effective parents will do this. They'll say, listen, I'm your parent, so I think you're perfect, right? But I understand that in this moment you're experiencing yourself as something other than that. And I'd really like to help you deal with the fact that you're feeling that way, right? I don't want to talk to you and say I'm going to gush about you because, there's time and place for that. But I want to acknowledge that you're feeling this way. I don't think you want to feel this way, right? You've indicated to me you don't want to feel this way. I'd love to help you find a way to feel more of the ways you'd like to be feeling. Something happens with people in general and with children in particular, because I feel like children are so accustomed to having adults trying to manipulate their experience and telling them how they should and shouldn't feel. Get excited, not that excited, be a little quieter, but and it's interesting because from a loving parent perspective, telling them don't devalue yourself, you're wonderful, that seems so much more positive than sit down, shut up, be quiet. But it varies kind of similar because it's that trying to control and dictate their experience. Rather than saying, okay, that's your experience. How can we help you change that? Would you like to change it? Let's work on figuring out a way to do that. They open up because they recognize that you are very often, like if I'm like a coach or a therapist and I'm working with a client, very often that official aspect of the relationship gets in the way of me as an individual helping them as an individual. And so very early on, one thing I like to do is to establish, although you are working with me and paying me to do these certain things and so on and so forth, I don't want you to think I have all the answers, and I don't want to, I want to be able to kind of come together with you as an individual and figure out how to improve what it's like to be you. And that gives me tremendous flexibility. It gives them tremendous flexibility. Because we don't have to interact with our ideas about the other person. We can interact with the reality of who they are. And that's a very cool and a very powerful thing. And it allows you, it's not about being less close with your kids. I think it's about opening up a new avenue kind of intimacy where I can do father-son, I can do mother-son, mother-daughter, whatever. We can also get real with each other sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like the relationships between parent and child that I know that seem to be the best are the ones where they know how to step into like get real time, where it's just one individual to another. How can I help you best? Can I help you best now as being a mother, or can I help you best as being a person you're going to talk to? And having that flexibility, this is another theme really in just problem solving in life in general. If I have the ability to assume different roles, to step into different states, to interact with another person based on what the situation demands, rather than based on how I feel like I should act or like I need to act or whatever, I have more options available to me. And there's something called optionality, which is very powerful. And it's basically the person who has the most options wins, because they get the widest variety of tools that they can choose from. And I mean, one, you find better solutions, I think, in interacting with people or your children. The other thing, your children are people, and that's not always obvious, I find, to parents. But like what it does is it changes, more than like changing anything that you do in your interactions with your kids, in my experience, it creates a different context where your child, who is your son, who is your daughter, who's whatever, they are your son, they are your daughter, but they're also an individual. Before they're your child, they are an individual. And sometimes it can be too much to put on the child persona or mask or whatever, but they're always an individual. They're always dealing with their stuff. And if you can kind of do that individual thing too, it allows you to communicate at those times when otherwise it's very onerous. Do you ever like think about your relationship with your parents? Do you ever just not up to talking to them because you got to step into a certain role in order to have a conversation with them? I know the family members with whom I'm closest and the ones that I can actually talk to about a problem if I want to, they're the ones who they don't have to, they can just be them. And I can just be me. And they don't have to be the way they were last time we talked. They don't have to be my grandparent, and I don't have to be their grandchild. I can swear if I need to, and I can do whatever, or they can swear, you know what I mean? We can do whatever we need to do. That tends to be kind of the most effective thing. And so that's kind of just a big picture, I think, a way. Allow yourself to be an individual with your child, because the funny thing is, they're an individual too. I think that's just kind of a funny thing too. It's like when you first find out certain things about your parents, like, oh, they got mad, or, oh, they're romantically interested in each other. Like kids are funny about like when parents kiss and stuff. It's like, oh, they're not just my parent. That's what that is. They're not just my parent. They're a person too. That can be awkward if it comes out in those kind of situations, but it can also be an immensely powerful thing, because you've both got a secret and you share a secret in common. You have certain roles that you occupy and inhabit in life, but you're also people. And before you step out of your room and into the world, you're just people. And you're people who have problems, and you're people who have aspirations, and people who want to improve what it's like to be you. You're moving towards what you want, away from what you don't. And when you can unlock that level of realness, pretty much there's not a whole lot you can't talk about. And when you can start talking about this stuff, you generally can help each other sort of come to answers and things. Yeah,
I think it's really amazing too. What G&M allows us to do is to understand for a child. I mean, I remember, gosh, this is very real. Is like, I remember asking my mom, like, why do I have acne? Why can't I get rid of this acne? And she gave me just kind of like oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have acne when I was a child. Your father did though. You probably got it from him. And it was like, well, damn, that's that. And so I then just there was nothing really I could do with that. I didn't know that there was some type of recurring conflict that I had going on regarding feeling soiled and feeling attacked that was causing my acne. I had no idea. And so this is such an amazing gift to your children, to raise them in this paradigm so that they understand that their symptoms are nothing to be afraid of. They make perfect sense. Someone posted in one of the groups about a child who had a rash around her mouth. It's like she had a separation conflict. There was something, and did she have something on her hand and touched her mouth and realized, oh, I had something greasy or gross on my hand, and I wanted to separate from that, and that what caused the rash. It could be so many different things, but I feel like it's so cool to teach children this, because when they get the connection when they understand that, you know what, you sit them down and you talk to them about the body and the way that it functions. When you got scared, when you got caught off guard, when you were speechless from this, this shocking thing that you stumbled across that you maybe shouldn't have seen, or maybe were shocked to have seen, your body wanted to help you with that, and it helped you in very specific ways. And that's why you're having this cough. That's why you've got this asthma and this wheezing. And so helping them to just see that connection. And because I feel like a child would be so much more perceptive and would understand, or have the capacity to understand and have that awareness. Oh gosh, I just got caught off guard. Oh, that, I'm thinking that this stinks. This situation is really irritating to me. And when they can make that connection to the next time they've got a sniffly nose or a cold or a cough, or realize that they didn't want to swallow something, that is such an amazing gift to give them. So I think that kind of just having that conversation and talking about the G&M stuff as symptoms come up and explaining to them it's how the body works. It's the language of the body. It's letting us know that you experience this thing. I think that is super cool, because then you're giving them the keys. That's what this is that it's giving them their personal power, showing them how much power they have over their body, over their own experience. Diana said when her daughter loves, when she realizes she's got choices over her feelings. It's like, oh, I get to choose. Oh, I don't have to feel this way. I wish that someone had given me that gift early on of autonomy in the way that I feel. It's like, oh, just because this thing happened to you doesn't mean you have to keep feeling like that. Doesn't mean you have to keep beating yourself up. Just because, this embarrassing thing happened at school, or you tripped over your words, or you forgot your lines in the play, doesn't mean that you have to keep feeling embarrassed and feel bad about yourself and never go out for, you know what I mean? It's like getting to the root of that and helping them to connect that to if they've got a headache, if they're having aches and pains, if they're sore. I just feel like that's such a cool thing to be able to do.
Well, it's interesting too. And if you, depending on the level of interest with the health stuff, for your child, you could teach your child how to use G&M without ever talking about the health stuff. You could just talk to them about their experiences. If that kind of were more immediately accessible, kids, they love the idea that they can control how they feel. I love that. It's like, how impressive, or how kids love it when they learn how to do something new and they want everyone to see. It's an enthusiasm for the acquisition of new knowledge and skills, which is a very powerful thing. And it's something really that we can learn, I think, from kids. And one of the big things is, and this is, so the big framework was the whole, be a person, talk to them like a person, or at least have the option of doing that. Meet them where they are. Do you know what I mean? Acknowledge how they're feeling and actually ask them, not like in a patronizing way, but in like a real way. Do you want to feel some way other than you're feeling right now? If there were a way to feel differently than you do, not because it's wrong or because it's bad, would you like to change how you feel about that thing? Because there's so many things that are possible for you that you just haven't even considered yet. And I haven't told you because I haven't even considered, because nobody told me. And beginning to kind of open up their minds to the nature of possibility, because there's what the problem is, and then there's really what the problem is. And so a lot of the times, what's my problem? Well, somebody said something I didn't like on social media. That's my proximal problem. My real problem is that I didn't have anything better to do. Is that I wasn't moving in the direction of what I wanted with sufficient momentum to make that thing not matter to me. It's like there was a version of me who would not have cared about that thing. And I know this is true because in the past things have happened to me that have been absolutely devastating, that I was humiliated by, or that I was really, usually it was kind of an embarrassment thing. And those things have since happened to me in another kind of context. And because I'm so focused on what I want to do, I say stupid things all the time when I'm presenting to large groups of people. But because I'm so, and actually it helps, right? They think it's funny. But if I'm really adamant and kind of focused on what I want to accomplish or the information I want to convey, if I misspeak or something like that, I just sort of brush it aside because I got better things to do. You know what I mean? And I think that one of the things is that in helping a child in general, if something traumatic happened, or if something unpleasant happened, or we say trauma, we're not necessarily talking about like profound things. Extreme embarrassment can be a traumatic experience. I know I was so good at being embarrassed, it was catastrophic. I just, my face turned red and I was just absolutely mortified at school and around family, and all sorts of stuff would happen. But I don't want to necessarily go right after that thing. Like if your child doesn't want to talk about that thing, you remember what it was like to have a parent that just insisted on talking about something and all you wanted to do was just to not think about it, because every time you thought about it, it was way up in your face and it made you come as only relive that experience? I think that's one of the big mistakes that we do, is that we try to solve problems, or we try to deal with problems by talking about it when it's the least comfortable and productive time to do it. Do you know what I mean? Rather than insisting on, if the child's upset about something and they don't, I mean, at a very young age, children will demonstrate a non-desire to talk about certain subjects. And we feel like we have to force them to talk about it because there's something kind of unresolved there. I like to take kind of an indirect approach to stuff like that. So if I'm dealing with someone who's had an extreme trauma, a lot of the times adults, they actually do want to talk about it. But I like to talk about other things instead. I like to show and teach a skill set in a safe environment, in a less emotionally charged environment, because I know that if I can teach you a certain skill set, like let's say about how to change your feelings, how to amplify a positive feeling, or kind of like pull the plug on a negative one, if you master that in areas where the feelings aren't that intense and serious or severe, they're not like a trauma, it's not a trigger for you, eventually what will happen is that skill will generalize, and you will make the connection in your own mind, and you'll say, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to feel that way. If I teach somebody how to amplify positive feelings, the mirror image of that is pulling the plug on negative ones. And so I think, and what's interesting is that a lot of the times, I know when I was growing up, the only times feelings were discussed were times when the feelings that were under discussion were bad, when I was very upset. And essentially what that did was that it taught me to associate conscious and deliberate engagement with my experience with negative experiences. So the last thing that I ever wanted to do was to pay attention to what I was thinking or feeling or try to change it, because God, the last time was when something happened and my mom was in my business and wouldn't leave me alone, and I just wanted to play video games and kind of just blow off some steam, you know? And so I think that's one of those things that's so easy to do. And that's how, for me, self-awareness as a people helper, whether you're a parent or a coach or a therapist or whatever, is so useful, because it allows you to see yourself interacting with them rather than just the person with whom you're interacting. And it also allows you to see the context in which you're interacting with them, and also all the contexts in which perhaps you're not interacting with them on this subject where you could be. And so if a child is upset about something, rather than trying to force them to talk about that, or trying to force them to force themselves to feel differently than they do, or anything that they're kind of not receptive to, what if when they were feeling fine, we talked about how to feel wonderful, we talked about how to feel excited, we talked about how to feel enthusiastic, we got them playing with their thoughts, playing with their feelings. And because that really is, it's this having something better to do is such a wonderful solution to things. Have you ever checked inside and thought about something that maybe it's, you know, a certain time you always feel bad about something, or it's been a certain amount of time since you thought about that thing that happened, and you like there's this almost internal committee that kind of like thinks, am I going to get upset about this? Am I going to go into a depression? Am I going to schmoo about this? Am I going to feel guilty about this? And then you kind of check and you realize there's something more important on the agenda, something matters more to you, something that you would rather feel wonderful about, or something that you're excited about, or something maybe that you're nervous about. That's one thing that's interesting to me, is that I never thought about all the times I had been humiliated in my life 5 minutes before a test that I had not prepared adequately for. I just didn't do it because I didn't have time. You know what I mean? I would do it later on in the evening or something like that when I should be studying instead. And so it's about learning, like for me, to teach a person to engage consciously with their experience is a really wonderful thing. And you want to do it in contexts that aren't negative, that aren't embarrassing, when they're not angry, when they're not feeling bad, when they're feeling really good. How are you feeling right now? Would you like to feel 10 times better than that? What's true to you and for you? How do you know it's time to feel good right now? Start asking your child questions about their experience and about how they're feeling when they seem to be feeling really, really good. And say, you know, you might want to pay attention to what you're doing right now because you seem like you're feeling really good. And I bet you'd love to feel this way more of the time than you do already. Wouldn't that be great if you could feel, and you want to talk to them when they're in that state. You want to talk to them about states when they're in states you want them to think about, because then they'll associate conscious engagement with what it's like to be them with feeling the way they were feeling then. You know what I'm saying? And that is like my whole work with people is all about, I spend about 5 minutes gathering information on what they think is wrong with them, and then about the rest of the time, all of it, focused on getting their brain pointed in the right direction and getting them going somewhere else instead. Because you know, like a child, if they have the apparatus to worry or to devalue themselves, they've got everything they need neurologically, psychologically, to get hugely excited about something, about themselves, or get really into who they are, or get really into some project that they want to work on, or something really fantastic, starting a business. And, you know, they got like 6-year-olds starting businesses now. It's incredible. And there's no reason that your child can't be doing those things too. But I think it's about, and I mean, this is one of those things, it's this imagining better than the best you know, and it's transcending, because it's very hard not to speak from our own personal experience. And if all I have is experience in dealing with and deconstructing and coping with problems, everything about the way I talk to my child will tend to be flavored with that. And what I'll be telling them is not what I'll be communicating to them. What I'm telling them is, oh, you're okay. And so, but what I'm communicating to them is, you think about your experience and you try to work on your experience when your experience is so awful that you can't stand it. That's how you know it's time to engage with your experience. And that is just a programming to kind of go unconscious. And so in general, I think teaching kids to engage with, to think about what it's like to be them when what it's like to be them isn't bad. Notice that. They just say, sit quietly and just notice what it's like to be you. It's the overall, it's your thoughts, it's your feelings, it's what you're thinking about, it's what you're excited about, it's what you're worried about. It's all that stuff all together. And get them sort of like, what could you be excited about right now that you're not? Isn't that funny? Just sit down and think about that with your kids. Isn't it funny that there's like 1,000 things that you could be excited about if they occurred to you, that you aren't excited about only because they haven't occurred to you, and you're that far away. I mean, it's like the day before your birthday. You know what I mean? Like when you were a kid, like the day before your birthday, how exciting it was, the day before Christmas. Like we are in a perpetual state of being a day before the most wonderful idea we've ever had in our life, or the most wonderful feeling or sensation we've ever had in our life. But we teach kids only to get excited on the 24th. Or the day before their birthday, or whatever. But you could just as easily, I think, teach them to get super excited about so many different things. That, I mean, and honestly, there are people who simply just do not have time for trauma. I know that. And it's not that it's not okay to have had something bad happen to you. It's, would you like to feel differently about that than you do right now? Let's see if we can build that experience for you. And fill up your calendar so that when something happens, and it's like, I mean, have you had something bad happen to you, or something unpleasant, or something made a remark to you, or something embarrassing, or something upsetting happened, and you just didn't have time to worry about it because you had so much good, bad, neutral on your calendar, there was just no space for it? This to me is like teaching kids to keep a full experiential calendar is such a valuable thing, because when someone's a jerk to them at school, or their, you know, your ex whatever, who they go spend time with sometimes, does something inappropriate or says something they shouldn't have said, or, you know, whatever, the child just doesn't have time to get hung up on it. Like really, like there's just not time there. And that for me as a human being, as an individual, has been an immensely powerful thing. And, you know, I think you do want to like nurture your kids and interact with them in that parent-child relationship, because it's a wonderful one. There is also the individual, and there's that teaching them to engage with their experience. And it's like, you don't teach people how to operate, you know, you don't teach people how to use a gun in a war zone. You know, you take them to the range, or you take them to training, like when you become a police officer or a soldier or whatever, you take them to safe spaces and you teach them how to become very efficient at using that stuff. I think that that's the way to work on our experience and our control over it too. It's like the problem is we're so focused on problems because that's the only time we ever pay attention to what's going on. But if you can really get them equipped to like have control over their experience, stuff can happen. And they will automatically and naturally begin to work with those things. And you know what I'm saying? They'll begin to respond to those things. They will begin to deal with it, because like we reach in naturally, psychologically, neurologically to our skill set and say, okay, how can I work with this? And when people, when children, when whoever it is gets stuck, it's when something happens and they got nothing to respond to it with. They don't have a skill set for dealing with that. They don't have something to work with. And so my thing is like, I'm constantly filling up my tool bag, you know, so that I don't know what's going to happen, but I know probably I'm going to have something really useful for it, because I'm collecting all these technologies and collecting all these things that allow me to create the kind of experience I want regardless of what's happening.
Yeah, and that's such a gift to children, because, you know, that's the thing I think that keeps parents up at night and gives them conflicts and nest worries and all of these different things, is they're just so gravely worried about their children, and their children being fragile and unable to kind of like interact with the world in a way that doesn't traumatize them. And this toolbox and giving this to them and modeling it for them and showing them that there is always a way to change the way that you feel and to be reaching for something better, and that you don't get tripped up on little things going wrong in your life and kind of, you know, be upset about them for extended periods of time. Like, you've got to show them that, which I think is one of the biggest things. I think in the last helping kids deal with conflicts, we really focused on modeling, because it's one thing to tell your child something and to show it to them, and to show it to them in your behavior and your actions and how you live. And it becomes just kind of like the way that your family starts to exist in the world, is this antifragility, where we can take situations and things can go wrong, and we can have challenges and obstacles and traumas and things happen. But we're very resourceful people. I mean, even talking like that, yeah, we're very resourceful people. Like, we are able to create amazing situations out of anything that happens. We see the seed of greater benefit in every adversity, and kind of like, I think having those sorts of values in a family is so amazing because so few people do. I mean, there were things in my family that were just like these huge obstacles, huge mountains, and those mountains got passed on to the children. And if it's finances for your family, or if it's health, it's like you'll see these same patterns show up in your children because you didn't have adequate tools to deal with it in your own life. These obstacles, they stayed around in your life, and you just kind of learned to live with them. You dressed them up, you put a Christmas hat on them, and you welcome the dysfunction into the family instead of crowding it out with different things. And so I think that by being more resourceful in your own experience and showing your children how to do that and gaining the confidence that there is no situation that can happen that you can't find a way around, that you can't create a new mental pathway and find a new way to think and experience it. And I think conversations like that, in the minivan on the way home from school is like, oh, guess what, guys, this happened to me today. And, I got this bill, or I realized this thing was late, and I had the opportunity, I had the invitation to really freak out and get upset about it. But then I realized that I had choices and that I could feel a different way. And so I chose to feel better instead of worse. I mean, just something very simple, very little like that. Or, someone said something to me on Facebook, and I really wanted to get upset about it, but I realized in that moment that I could choose a different thought, and I chose that different thought, and I felt a lot better. I think teaching kids stuff like that is so cool because they'll extrapolate the pattern, and then they'll go to work and start using it in their own experience. And yeah, I mean, I wish I had that early on in life because for so many years, my patterns, and if I had passed my patterns on to my children, I kind of know exactly the experience they would have.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things too is like more than telling them things is that do the stuff yourself. It's immensely important because if I tell my child that their experience matters while going about having a really unpleasant experience myself, what they'll do is they'll turn into someone who either who rebels and doesn't pay any attention to that. In any event, they will replicate my experience. Children replicate the experiences of their parents, right? And so that's the only thing I've ever been able to figure out to tell a parent, to really get them to sink in to how important it is that they enjoy what it's like to be them. Not that they tell the kids about how important it is that they enjoy what it's like to be them, because your kids are modeling 100% of the things that you do, not just what you talk about. And they're incredibly perceptive. I remember perceiving aspects of my dad's experience and figuring, oh, that's how I'm supposed to feel about myself or about women or about my relationships to whomever. Like I picked that up, and there's nothing that you can do for your kids that will be more profoundly positive than systematically working on consciously engaging with your experience and improving what it's like to be you. And I think it's fine to tell them about certain things and talk about them, but watch out for this too. Have you ever had like your parents sit down and like they read a book and they're like, oh, we're going to talk about feelings and how important those are, and the kids' eyes they glaze over because they know a phony, because they're so real, they perceive a phony. And so what you have to do is you've got to work on your experience so much that you're genuinely excited about something cool that you did. I remember I was talking to my mom on the phone about a week or so ago, and we were talking about her relationship. She has a daughter who is, how old is she now? 13. And she was asking me about like setting some boundaries and kind of like she basically she runs herself kind of ragged doing too much for too many people, and she wants to start not doing that. But obviously people now have expectations of her. And I was like, okay, well, you might try this, this, and this. And she was like, oh, great. And you could tell that she was like trying to memorize the script of what she was going to say. And I said, no, it's not about that. It is about cultivating within yourself the experience that I'm describing to you, and then allowing that experience to express itself as it does naturally. Do you know what I mean? And that's how you have real conversations with the real individuals that your kids are, is that you speak from your own personal experience. And now if your experience is kind of stress and worry and kind of crap, and you try to speak to them about wonderful, nice things, they're not going to buy it. They're going to see the whole context. And so this is, if you're going to communicate something of value to your kids, you communicate it experientially. And in a straightforward kind of way, you let it be okay that you aren't any better at letting things be okay than you are right now. That's important, because a lot of the times what we do is we learn about something like letting whatever happens be okay, and then we don't let it be okay when we don't let whatever happens be okay, because we don't recognize our not letting whatever happens be okay as a part of what's happening. And we don't recognize that we are our response to what's true, not to what's true. Now, I could sit a child down of 8 years old or 14 years old, and I could say, listen, you're not what's true. You're your response to what's true. And they'd be like, yeah, whatever. Can I go look at Instagram now? But if I communicate that to the child 100 times throughout the day in little subtle ways that I react to things that happen and things that people do and the ways that things go, and I kind of cultivate it in my own consciousness and I make it a part of who I am, that's what the child will start to pick up on. They'll start to pick up on that. Oh, and then, maybe you'll have a talk about it. So I think for every time I talk about a principle, I want to demonstrate it 100 times. You know what I mean? And you want to let it sink in this kind of other than and one of the really funny things is that you'll be talking sometimes to your child about letting things be okay, or letting whatever happens be okay, letting their feelings be okay, or not feeling bad. Meanwhile, you're feeling bad about the fact they're feeling bad. And you're telling them to interact with their reality in a way that's different than you're interacting with your reality, because them being upset is a part of your reality and you're resisting it and suffering over it. But you want them to let the fact that so-and-so said something mean to them at lunch be okay. But you're not necessarily, and it's not that I think that we're bad or anything like that. It's that we fail to see what we're doing right here and right now in the present moment. And that's the only thing our kids see, is the manner in which we're interacting right here and right now. And so it's kind of a cool line. I mean, this isn't like something that you like, oh, okay, what am I supposed to do? Oh, yeah, I've got to experience it 100 times. These are things that you start thinking. There's no way around inculcating this into your consciousness. I mean, it's fun. There's nothing more. It's not something you have to set aside 35 minutes. It's that you just watch whatever you're doing now, driving, instead of doing what we're talking about doing here, and it'll begin to kind of supplant it. And so one thing I find that's very cool is, can you simultaneously affirm to your child that it's okay that they're feeling the way that they are, and that they don't have to feel that way if they don't want to, and that they're capable of finding some other way of feeling. And it's weird. It's interesting. How okay can you let it be that you're feeling the way that you feel right now, and also recognize there are things that are possible that I haven't discovered yet. There are things about myself that I don't know. There are levers that I can pull and buttons that I can push that can change my experience. It's not a big deal that you're having the experience that you're having. If it's a terrible experience, that's okay. Because if you can't let the thing that you're having a terrible experience about if you can't let that thing be okay, oftentimes the way to get your foot into the door of pivoting, of changing that thing around, is in letting it be okay that you're having a terrible experience, a not okay experience of whatever happened. That oftentimes is enough to kind of get you to that point where you stop kind of like freaking out and you can kind of go to work on the experience. You have to demonstrate this stuff though. I mean, like, it's amazing to watch how subtly children model their parents' behavior. And it has different content. So the stuff they're worried about, or how they express that worry, or how they deal with it, it all looks different. And so people will say, oh, they're nothing like their parent. I'll go, if you look at the patterns are the same. The content tends to be different. So what you want to start doing really is not being so preoccupied with the content, not worried about what it is that they're worried about, right? You start interacting with and letting it be okay. You show them what to do by letting it be okay. Because if you can dealing with your children is probably the most difficult thing to do resourcefully, because if you've got these dysfunctional patterns of focusing on what you don't want, or of worrying, or of resisting, it's so easy to apply it to your kids because you love them so much. It's like the intensity of the emotion almost like overrides your ability to look at something and say, this isn't working. You know what I mean? So if you can respond resourcefully to the fact that your kids are having problems, what will happen is that will translate to your children responding resourcefully to whatever problems they're having, which will translate to solutions for those problems consistently. You have to be able to send them out though. Like, you know what I mean? It's like that, sending kids out into the world, sending them into their experience. Is like you bore them into this experience that they're having, and that's not a bad thing. So you have to trust them, I think, to kind of have sovereignty over their experience, and you want to equip them, you want to offer them things that you can do. But it's like if you want someone to copy you, the best thing to do is not to recommend that they do what you're doing, because they'll say, who the hell are you? Get out of here. This is my experience. The best thing you can do is kind of mind your business and do it yourself. And then they'll start noticing, they'll start saying, oh, what's going on over there? I find that one of the things in personal growth, and you can interrupt me at any time, one of the things is that there tend to be two types of parenting approaches that really don't work well. when it comes to this like mindset stuff and being conscious. The first one is the parent who says, well, it's all coming from us anyway. We're in control of our thoughts and feelings. I don't care about the way you're feeling. You know, is it that kind of like that indifference to their experience, because you know at some level if they did certain things differently, they'd feel differently than they were. And that's kind of like one extreme that, although maybe it is kind of technically correct, it's not accessible to the child at that moment in time. The main thing they notice there is what seems to be the indifference of their parent who's supposed to care about them. And they'll get so hung up on that that they will continue to create negative experiences, to continue to give the parent an opportunity to not be a jerk in response to them. You know what I'm talking about? So that's one. I don't think anyone here necessarily does that, but that positive thinking sometimes gets a bad rap because a couple of people will read one book about mindset, and then they'll start behaving kind of like a jerk to everyone who doesn't know that stuff that they didn't know 5 minutes ago. So that's the one extreme. The other extreme is the tendency to affirm to the child that they have no, you acknowledge the fact that they're feeling bad, but you also imply that there's nothing they could be doing differently to feel other than they are. And one of the biggest ways that I can imply to you that it's not possible for you to feel differently than you do is for me to go around behaving as if it's not possible for me to feel differently than I do, to complain to you about my feelings, to suffer over my feelings, to feel guilty about the fact that I'm feeling the way that I am, whatever. And so in between those two extremes is that simultaneous affirmation of, it's fine you're feeling the way that you're feeling, and it's possible for you to feel different. Isn't that wonderful? Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's possible doesn't mean you're obligated. You know what I mean? Because that's one of those things, and I think it's interesting with parenting. We tend to kind of like have to tell kids what to do. You know, it's like, don't pick your nose when you're there and don't play in the street. We regulate their behavior. But I think a wonderful counterbalance to that would be this continual affirmation of their utter and irrevocable sovereignty over their own experience. Like sit down and did you know that I can't make you feel anything? That I can't make you experience me other than you do. I can't make you experience your world other than you do. You have complete control over that. It's a lot of power. It's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of things that can go on in your experience that don't feel good. And there's a lot of wonderful things that can go on in your experience that aren't going to happen unless you're really engaged in trying to figure out how to bring those things about. But you know what I mean? Kind of like affirming that, kind of like, God, that's such an amazing thing, because it's possible. I mean, it's just such a delicate, it's such a fraught relationship, particularly if you haven't cultivated that individual to individual, adult to adult capacity to talk to your kids, straight talk, out of patterns, just straight you and them. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like almost like you would talk to them if you met them at a bar after a hard day and you're like, oh, hey, what's going on with you? And the guy just told you everything because, you know, he doesn't know who you are, and so he's not worried about you judging him. And you kind of went back and forth. Having that ability to talk, you know what I mean? It's kind of it's kind of a hilarious, I feel like it would make like a good, like, you know, those funny, like, paintings they put over pool tables of like dog, like a hilarious kind of thing like that. But sometimes, I mean, if you can't get through to your kids, maybe think about, you know, pretend like just imagine some kind of hilarious film noir scene where it's like you can tell they're having a hard time and you're like, hey, what's going on with you, buddy? What's going on? Maybe you could be the bartender. I don't know. Don't actually serve them alcohol. I'm not recommending that. I'm just sort of like, you know, just flying off the scenario here. Teaching kids a dysfunctional relationship to reality, I think is something that's very easy to do. That's resisting. If you're resisting the fact that they're suffering, you're teaching them to resist and suffer over things. It's so tempting. It's so tempting because you feel like such a good parent, and it feels so inevitable and innate and biologically almost, you know, inevitable that you would anguish and suffer over the fact that your kids are having a hard time. But your willingness to look at that heartbreaking situation and look at it square in the eye and say, okay, given this, what do I want? You're giving your children an amazing gift, because what you're doing is that you're giving them a personal experiential reference point for having been around somebody who looked at something as hard as seeing their child suffer and respond resourcefully to it. There's nothing better that you can give your kids than that. And it's not a callous indifference. It's just don't do what doesn't work. I mean, I think that's one of those things, is that oftentimes people care enough about their kids to do what doesn't work, resist over it, suffer, worry, feel guilty, blame themselves, so on and so forth. But it's something else entirely to love them enough to find out how to do something that does work. You know what I mean? That going into that uncertainty. It's easy to learn something when you're like, oh yeah, it's in the manual, let me look it up. But when there isn't a manual, or when the pages of the manual are scattered to the four corners of the earth, you know, we've condensed it nicely for you in the Every Better Life course, by the way. But a lot of people don't know about that. And whether you take the course or not, it doesn't really matter in terms of this. That willingness to look at the child having a hard time and know there is a solution for them. Believe in the child's problems less than they do. And at the same time, though, don't invalidate the fact that they are experiencing those problems as very real. That's been, for me, one of the most powerful things in interacting with people, is to look at somebody and to really feel, right, and acknowledge, God, they really think that this thing is, this experience, this feeling, this whatever, this self-evaluation for them, there's nothing really for them right now. At the same time, I'm utterly convinced that this is a problem that they are capable of solving. That doesn't mean I go over and shake them and say, you got to start feeling differently right now. It just means every time I look at them, I see them as they want to be. And I recognize, I feel the compassion that I feel for someone who's suffering over something that they're capable of correcting. And that's a very powerful thing. That's an because I don't know, my parents interacted with me a lot of the time in a way that I came away from it thinking, oh shit, there might really be something wrong with me. Because they were really laying it on thick there.
Oh man, yeah.
What is, you know what I mean? And it was tough too, because kids hear everything you think and say about them. And I remember when I was like 9 months old, my grandmother was like, "Ooh, his feet turn in and his knees are kind of funny." And then later on, she's saying, "Oh, you're so perfect, everything." And I'm like, "But wait a minute, when I was 9 months old, you said," and I got creeped out because in that.
Steve remembers everything, by the way.
Well, I remember that, and I think the thing is just respond resourcefully to what's true. Look at it and say, okay, given this, what do I want? See constantly in the child the capacity. See two things simultaneously: their right to feel the way that they do, and their capacity to feel differently. And how can I, and that's an interesting thing to kind of program into your mind, how can I, in every communication with my child, convey to them it's okay that they're feeling the way that they are, and that it's possible for them to feel better, for them to feel different, for them to go into an entirely new world of experience. And the way that you do that is by doing that yourself, is that you go into new worlds of experience all the time and be trailblazing these things all the time. And it's funny too, this is tough, but I think this is that kind of like ever vigilance of a parent, to never force any kind of thought on child. And what I mean by that is to never force them to feel other than they do. Don't encroach upon their sovereignty of their experience, while at the same time always being willing to offer something useful at the slightest indication that they want something, no matter how many times they've been petulant in the past or just used it, or against you or whatever. So never force it, always available, is an interesting thing too, because it only takes one. Literally, you only have to do something smart as a parent one time, completely change your child's life. It will equip them to do everything they need to do. And I think it's just every moment is an opportunity to communicate with them non-verbally, oftentimes, what it is you want them to know, what it is that you want them to be, what you want them to experience is true to them and for them and about them. And I think one thing is that we tend to get really stuck. We want to sit down and we want to say, listen, I love you and you're wonderful and there's nothing wrong with you and you're going to be okay. Do you understand all that? And we want them to say back to us, yes, I understand all those things. And recognize sometimes that's about you wanting to feel okay and better. It's, and that although it's nice if you can get that response, if you can't, that's okay. You let them, it's like the classic thing, like the child that like goes and slams the door or whatever, and they're at one level expressing a lot of contempt for the parent, but they're deriving something that they need from the overall experience. You know what I'm saying? Even if what you were doing wasn't fair, you know what I'm saying? They're learning how to deal with something being not fair or feeling like something's being not fair. So yeah, I think it's just sort of being awash in opportunity and being confined by very rigid ideas about what parent-child relationships have to be. If you start thinking like this, though, the worst thing that will happen is that your child will stop being worried and they'll start being confused. Because it's such a radically different way of dealing with things. Mm-hmm. And you can't have a child, you can't make a child read Every Better Life course for teens. It's not going to work, because that's in that context. My parent gave me a book. I don't want to read it. I want to do this instead. It has to be a constant communication. And that's why we're really trying to sell you on this idea of doing this stuff yourself. You can't, like, if you want to really raise a happy individual, you raise it within yourself first. And your child will sort of look and say, oh, that's interesting. They used to be really high strung and now they're not. And now they're happy and now they feel this way and that way. You'll communicate more to them that way than any other.
That is absolutely true. And I think it's even more true if like the children that you're dealing with are infants and they're nonverbal and they don't speak yet and they don't understand language. So you can't have these kind of conversations that you'd have with like a 10-year-old. that is all the more reason to learn how to cultivate these feelings within yourself, because that's all they're responding to is like your deepest feeling about their situation and their state. And, you know, they're responding to that. Like little kids that have conflicts while they're in the womb, there was something the mother was experiencing and that got transferred. They can feel that. And that is what matters most, is like you're feeling your like vibration, what is going on in your innermost being. They are responding to that place. And so that's why it's so important that you need to figure out how to get that place in you at ease, feeling good, seeing all the possibilities, focusing on what you want. You know, we've got people who like just listen to our videos and listen to Resolve and listen to their stuff just in the background of their kids. You know, they don't tell their kids to listen to it, but because it's just like soaking in that, you know, the parents are starting to, you know, live this way and like live this life philosophy, and it's just spilling over. It has no place to go but out. Once you're so saturated and filled up with this way of thinking. And I love that, everything you're saying too about the, you know, it's okay that you're feeling the way that you are, and it's possible to feel better. That's your own mantra.
And not but. And.
It's okay that I'm feeling the way that I am, and it's possible to feel differently. That is so comforting.
Makes you feel better.
It's okay that you're feeling the way that you are, everyone that's watching this video, and it's possible to feel differently or to feel better. That it just like, it helps you melt, it helps you relax, and that's what your children need, is for you to be relaxed and calm and cool and able to handle this mind like water. You know, things will happen. You know, we can't live in a plastic bubble. We aren't going to be protected from all possible things that could happen. But when you are calm and you know that you can get from any place to where you want to be, that any situation can be transformed by the way that you choose to think about it, you just respond appropriately, and you don't freak out, and you don't, you know, and if you do freak out, you say, oh, it's okay that I'm freaking out right now, and it's possible to feel differently. You know, it's just, you stay on that leading edge of your experience, and you realize that it's what I'm doing right here, right now, that matters, that determines how everything that's coming to me next. And helping the kids to get that too is going to help them so much for their entire life.
We understand this when it comes to like local news. Like, you know, like do you remember what was on local news January 4th, 1997? And yet, hopefully not, and yet on that particular day, that stuff was like the most important, like Channel 9, Eyewitness News, you gotta watch because the insurance company's charging. You know, it was like the biggest thing ever. Like, your current response to what's true is the only thing that matters. What you did on January 3rd, 1997 isn't relevant anymore. And I think that we can understand that in certain contexts. I don't spend a lot of time trying to look up the newspaper from way back then. You know what I'm saying? I go and I get the most current one because I know that's where the action is. Actually, I don't do it at all because I don't care. But if I did, that's what I would do. And, you know, for you, what that means is learn to start living on the latest news when it comes to you and how you're feeling, which is to say, you are your response to whatever is true. And then as soon as you do that response, you are your response to that response. And as soon as that response is done, you're your response to those two responses. Recognizing that is such an immensely powerful thing. The trick here is not feeling bad. The trick is responding resourcefully to however it is you happen to be feeling at a given moment in time. That's an immensely powerful thing, because for most, I mean, you know, people who, like kids who throw, or adults for that matter, who throw physical tantrums or break things and all this, that's the only outlet that they have for expressing this. And, you know, it's like the emotion fills up a certain kind of imaginary container. And at that point, like you said, it's got to come out. And this is true for wonderful things too, by the way, good feelings or useful feelings, but you want to have something else that you can do. I mean, I literally in the past have thrown like electronics or remotes, or especially like in the early days of Bluetooth. I'm sort of ashamed, but also feel sort of justified in the fact that I actually threw a couple of speakers across the room. This is before I started doing this stuff. And I mean, it was ridiculous. It seems ridiculous to me now, and I think that's a very good thing. I think that if what you were doing 5 years ago doesn't seem totally absurd to you now, you probably haven't grown quite as fast as you're going to grow in the next 5 years. It should be hilarious. If you grow a little bit, it'll be embarrassing. If you grow a lot, it'll be absolutely hilarious. But it's just recognizing that you are your response to what's true, and continually communicating that to your kids. Maybe you'll say it once in a while, but maybe not. Maybe you don't ever need to say it at all. You can demonstrate it constantly. Okay, given this, what do you want? You know, okay, given the fact that that's true, what do you want to do now? Do you want to feel better? Or and a lot of times people don't want to feel better. Do you want to feel better? you gotta glitch them out sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Ask them what's wrong, or what would help make this better. And they say, I don't know. And you say, well, if you did know, what would it be? There's something there. And you just got to get around that part that says that they don't know what it is, because of course they do. And you do this by doing it with yourself. If you kind of script these things, it'll sound phony and they'll spot you, because the kids are very discerning. But if this actually becomes the way you talk, do you know what I mean? They'll have no choice but to incorporate these things into their model of reality. Just like, by the way, they had no choice but to incorporate all the crap patterns that maybe you had when you were raising them into their model of reality. You can do it sort of in reverse. That's the funny thing, I think, is very oftentimes we indoctrinate our kids with things that don't work in a way that does work, which is to say that we just demonstrate it to them over and over and over again. And then we try to teach them things that do work in ways that don't work, which is that we sit them down and have a talk about it. And the interesting thing is, what would happen if we paired in indoctrination or teaching strategies like constant low-level exposure, ways that work, with things that actually work. So we teach things that work in a way of style of teaching that works too. They start picking up on those things and responding, and they recognize that it was about them. And that's just so cool that someone's playing this stuff in the background, right? Because one of these times what's going to happen is the child's experience, and whatever it is that I or you happen to be kind of, well, you'll be talking, I'll be blathering about, there's going to be an overlap, there's going to be a match, and they could listen to it 1,000 times and there's not a match. Not interested, who is that guy, he's boring, he's weird, he's stupid. And then one day I'm going to talk about something that's going to be relevant to their current experience. It's going to pace their current experience, which is I'm going to describe something that they're currently experiencing, and I'm going to recommend a solution to them when they're interested in having it, and then they're going to use it, and then they're going to have what's called a personal experiential reference point, which it no longer has anything to do with me, and it no longer has anything to do with their parent. They were feeling some way they didn't want to feel. They tried something, they felt better. That's theirs, and they owned that, and that's different. That is what got me into this stuff back when I thought this stuff was crap. Do you know what I'm saying? That was the thing. It was like, well, damn, that actually works. I feel better. Feeling better feels better than not feeling better than I did. And that is just such an incredibly powerful thing, like creating that and like recognizing your work is always right in front of you. And so if what you're doing is feeling bad about the fact you were stressed while you were pregnant, your job is to respond resourcefully to the fact you're feeling that way, not to feel some other way, not to feel bad about feeling that way. If you're freaked out about your kids, your job is to respond resourcefully to the fact that you're freaked out about your kids. It's just reality. It's just stuff. And in that sense, it's the same as whatever they're dealing with. You know what they're dealing with? Reality and stuff. And you can teach them how to respond resourcefully to reality and stuff by just responding resourcefully to whatever reality and stuff you've got going on for you right now. And you just understand that you don't have to see how that's going to help them. It's not important. You know what I mean? You don't have to sort of make a big display about it. Because if I have to make a big display about what I want to communicate to you, I'm not being congruent because I'm not doing it all the time. Like if you were to sneak into my house here and see me as I go throughout my day, you're not going to find a virtuous person or a sort of holy person or super upright, perfect person. You are going to find someone who's constantly conniving and contriving to improve what it's like to be him, though. And you know what I mean? I might have to explain to you if you were to say, hey, what was that all about? I'd say, well, I was doing this and trying to create this experience for myself or this result or whatever. But you'll find that it's there. And so I think the thing is you have to really live the life that you want your kids to live. I think it's not a good idea to try to give your kids a better life than the one that a lot of times we try to give our kids a better life than the one that we had, but we're not paying attention to the life that we're living right now. And I don't think I can give my child a better life than the one I am having presently. I feel like that is just that if I'm going to, and I don't think you can really force a child to be happy or sad or whatever, but if I'm going to maximally kind of like tap into my capacity to positively influence the experience of a child, I would want to tap into my capacity to maximally influence the quality of my experience in close proximity to them so that they could see those things and so that they could see me having a problem and responding to it. I remember when my grandfather had a problem, he would always just kind of do ba-ba-da-da-da, and it seemed to work really well for him. And if you're not avoiding shit that's unpleasant, you won't teach them to avoid stuff. If you engage resourcefully with it, you just show them it's not a big deal, you can do something about it. And it's okay to feel like it's a big deal, you can do something about that too. Everything's work-withable. And yeah, I think it's that. I think that we want to help our children have a wonderful experience sometimes without doing work on ourselves because we don't have time. You don't have time. You're busy. You got kids to worry about, college, you got all this school and all this work and all these different things going on, sporting events and all this different stuff. I don't have time to work on me. I just need to fix them. That's a tragedy, right? Because that is the most unintentional vanity ever, and it's hugely toxic, and it impedes your ability to do all the wonderful things you want to do. You have to do work on yourself. You have to create. And this is interesting. What if the only way to help your children feel the way they wanted to feel was to create within yourself the feelings you wanted them to have? You know what I'm saying? If you wanted them to feel confident, you had to create confidence within yourself as a parent. You can't say, am I a bad parent because my child's not feeling confident? That's teaching your child how to not feel confident. You know, you happen to be parenting and they happen to be in school or among friends or whatever. But bottom line, you're not feeling confident. They're not feeling confident. What if the only way to get them to feel happy or excited was for you to become very happy and excited? What would you do then? If that were, I'm not saying that's true, but if it were true, what would you do? It'd be very interesting if as an experiment, you would just go do that for 6 months or a year or the rest of your life and just see what happens. Because I think it would be immensely powerful. And I think that a lot of the things that get lost in translation when we try to have it out with our kids or have a talk with them or let them know how much we love them or whatever, when we say, okay, at 9:30, I'm going to sit down and let them know, things get lost in translation because they're thinking about their girlfriend, their boyfriend, or their test or whatever, and it's just like, get out of here, I know. But if you can just cultivate within yourself the experiences you want them to have, don't you see how that creates an environment? Don't you see the extent to which their environment is shaped by your behavior and by the after effects of your behavior and by how you felt about the last time they were feeling bad and your responses and reactions to that? If you can really just start to generate sort of from the core new higher quality experiences for yourself, you will of necessity be demonstrating to them ways that they can do that in their own situations. And I think that's the way to do it. I mean, it's kind of indirect, but it's a permeative kind of thing. And it's not patching up cracks anymore. It's like replacing the foundation. And I mean, it works incredibly well. Everybody that I work with who has children, the kids end up happier. I don't know. And I think it's because, one, I think the parents tend to straighten up a little bit and they start enjoying themselves. But the other thing is that the kid, when I start being happy and I start being smart and I start responding to my reality, it's like the kids have permission to do the things they already know how to do anyway. Because that's another interesting thing, is that I was a lot happier and more excited than the people in my family growing up. And I quickly was kind of tamped down into place, simmered down, I was told to do. And I did. And I simmered for about 12 years. And then I said, to hell with that. I like to rolling boil better, you know? And it's amazing what you don't have to fix in your kids when you fix things in yourself and you create a neutral environment. Their kind of like most wonderful inclinations start to come out, their excitement, their enthusiasm, their zest for life and all that stuff. And so, yeah, don't underestimate how easy it can be. I think it's
Yeah, that's so good. And this is actually super relevant. The next 2 months in the Resolve program, we're doing relationships. So December, we have 7 relationship patterns for success that extrapolate to all relationships. So romantic relationships, parent-child relationships. These modules are going to be absolutely phenomenal because they're just giving you tools for your toolbox, giving you new ways of engaging, replacing the patterns that just clearly don't work and cause dysfunction and cause problems and strife and worry and grief and angry people in a household. And create peace and harmony and elevate the awareness of everyone in the home when you apply these for yourself. So like what's going on in Resolve is absolutely amazing. That's a way to have something constantly in the background for yourself to model new and different patterns and this resourceful ability to engage and react and respond to life in ways that improve your experience and pull the plug on these conflicts that keep coming up and these patterns that we keep engaging in. And so that is really where we pour all of our heart and soul and best content is in Resolve. And through Monday, for the Cyber Monday, Black Friday thing, we're doing $15 off for your membership all weekend. So I would not wait. I would get in and start like soaking it up, just let it saturate, just let it come in, and it will spill over in amazing ways. We have amazing testimonial from someone in the group who has used the resources, the things that she's learned in Resolve to end a relationship that was super dysfunctional and not working for her for it seems like a very long time. And she finally, found a way to make sense out of leaving the relationship, and she's super happy about it. And we couldn't be more happy for her because, all we want is to help people improve their experience, improve what it's like to be you. And the tools that we found, the ones we've created ourselves, the ones we've adopted, and have kind of like put into a way in G&M language in Resolve is it's amazing. The stuff works. It's like, it's completely changed my own life, which is the only reason I'm doing this. And it's like completely changed the core of me as a person and my personality and how I respond and react to life. And, you know, it's really, really amazing what happens when you just like, we don't do anything but just like show you, like it's just like flipping a switch. You have all of the tools, they're all there. You've just kind of been in the dark. And so when you illuminate the light of awareness on your experience, and we kind of show you our roadmap for doing that, it's like, oh, look at all these tools I have. Look at all these tools that have been here all along. I just didn't know where they were, exactly how to use them. And that's what we do, is we just kind of show you, like plug you into your own resources and all the stuff that you're capable of. And that when you do that for yourself, it'll be so easy to do that for your children. And like, you will completely change your, you know, your legacy, the things that you teach to your children and the things that they're going to know and teach to their children. I mean, I just can't even imagine what it would be like if I had known this since a child, and like what we are capable of when we just kind of are aware of our own power and the power we have over our own body, and how we, you know, create certain symptoms by certain perceptions that we hold, and that we have the power to change that too. It's the greatest stuff ever.
Yeah, and the problem is there's nothing wrong with you. It's not that we're lazy. I mean, if there were like other work we had to do, we would do it. But there's just nothing wrong with you. It is a switch flipping kind of thing. And for me, it's about, there's what you want, and there's what you know or have a pretty good idea of what's going to get it for you, and then there's the doing of it. And a lot of what we do is provide you with the materials and the blueprints for constructing bridges between those things, so that the transition, I mean, it's kind of like if you're looking at like an electrical switchboard, or imagine some kind of electricity, and there were these 3 nodes, and it would work properly when the electricity could flow between them. But if one's cut off, they don't work. There's what I want, what I need to do to get it, whether it's internal stuff or behavioral stuff or whatever, and then there's my actual doing of whatever that thing is. We're sort of about connecting those things for you. And you know, you've had those moments before, right, where you sort of stumble into suddenly doing what you know you needed to do in order to create what you wanted, and then you got it. It was great. And so much of my life used to be spent waiting around for that connection to occur. And eventually I was like, this is stupid. I need to figure out some way to facilitate that, or to engineer the epiphany that gets me doing the thing that I'm pretty sure I always knew was the thing I needed to do to create the results that I want. And so that's cool. When you talk about like the generational stuff, that's really neat, because one of my big things, and I think that's something we accomplish pretty well, is it's a technology for shifting your experience, and there's not a lot of like extra crap added in. There's not a lot of weird stuff. I think there's like so many different approaches to life that they fall out of style because there's so much idiosyncratic stuff that's tacked onto it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, things about, I don't know, extraneous stuff. Like, we, go to a seminar or you see things about these personal growth companies and stuff, and they add in a lot of just weird stuff that doesn't really that's what people come away with. But my thing is, it's all about you and improving what it's like to be you. And it's not about getting you to be some way. It's about getting you to pay attention to the way that you are and deciding whether that's the way you want to be. And if you'd like to create some shift in your experience or some shift in your behavior, if you want to do things other than the things you want to do right now, or if you want to enjoy doing the things that you're doing right now more, if you want to do the different things and create different results, or just create a new experience of everything that's already true, I'm all about helping you do whatever it is you want to do. And I think that's interesting, and that's different than something that we see most of the time. And a lot of people, it's weird because they haven't had anyone ask what's it like to be you, and what do you want for it to be like to be you. Once you start tapping into this, though, this is the kind of pluripotent zone of consciousness, where when you start changing things around here, it's amazing the things that you can change in other areas of your life that you would have never thought that you could have, or that if you would have gone directly after it, you would have failed. I mean, if I try to go persuade somebody to do something, I'm very often not particularly successful. But if I get so excited about that thing myself that basically my existence becomes an act of persuasion, all of a sudden people become a lot more interested in it. And it is that kind of like deep work that's permeative and that gives rise to completely new realities. And so that's what that's what we do for ourselves, and that's what we like to teach other people to do. And
it works, and it's awesome. And we love you guys. Thank you for being here. The code is Cyber Monday if you want to join Resolve and get the $15 off through Monday. We're really excited about all the new people in the group. It's awesome what's going on in there. And so we want you to join in. Have a great night and a great rest of your weekend.
Bye.
Bye.